The massive view screen aboard the UES Diplomacy filled with the imposing sight of the Arxos homeworld. Commander Sarah Chen stood at parade rest, her dress uniform crisp despite the 16-hour diplomatic briefing she just endured. The planet below resembled a jeweled serpent's eye, its atmosphere swirling with amber storms and crystalline cities glinting like scales across its surface. Final approach cleared, Commander, Lieutenant Park announced from the helm. Arxos Control has transmitted landing coordinates for their capital complex. Sarah nodded, maintaining her composure despite the flutter in her stomach. After 2 decades of distant contact, this would be humanity's first face-to-face meeting with the Arxos. The warrior species controlled nearly a quarter of known space, their technology centuries ahead of Earth's. This mission had to succeed. Humanity needed allies, not another advanced species viewing them as primitive upstarts. "Take us in, Lieutenant." Nice and steady. Sarah watched the planet grow larger, its crystalline spires reaching skyward like massive talons. The Arxos architecture matched everything intelligence had gathered about their society. Beautiful, orderly, and designed to intimidate. The ship descended through layers of atmosphere, each more golden than the last. Sarah used the time to review what they knew about their hosts. The Arxos were humanoid but larger, averaging 7 feet in height, with iridescent scaled skin and remarkable physical capabilities. Their society centered around ritual combat and strict hierarchy, with leadership determined through ceremonial trials of strength and skill. Commander, her cultural advisor, Dr. Rivera, stepped closer and lowered his voice. "I've been reviewing the welcome ceremony protocols again. There's something about the timing that concerns me." "Now you tell me." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "We're about to land." "I know, I apologize. But the traditional greeting includes a demonstration of their ritual combat forms. The timing coincides with their festival of ascension, when leadership challenges are traditionally issued." He fumbled with his tablet. "I'm worried our presence during such a culturally significant period might be interpreted." The ship shuddered as landing struts engaged. Sarah straightened her uniform again. "Nothing we can do about it now, Doctor. We'll just have to be extra careful to follow their protocols exactly." The landing bay that enclosed them was massive, easily large enough to house a dozen ships the size of the Diplomacy. Ranks of Arxos honor guards stood in perfect formation, their ceremonial armor gleaming gold and black. At their head stood High Commander Kexar, distinguishable by the intricate patterns etched into his scale armor. Sarah led her delegation down the landing ramp, carefully matching the measured pace specified in the protocols. The Arxos were intimidating up close. The smallest still topped 2 meters, their muscled forms rippling with barely contained power. But it was their eyes that caught her attention. Violet irises with vertical pupils that seemed to evaluate every movement. High Commander Kexar stepped forward, moving with liquid grace despite his massive frame. "Commander Chen." His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The Arxos welcome you on this most auspicious day." Sarah bowed precisely to the depth indicated for her rank. "High Commander, we are honored by your welcome, and hope this meeting marks the beginning of a lasting friendship between our peoples." Indeed, those alien eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. "You arrived during our festival of ascension, when the worthy proved their right to lead through demonstration of the sacred combat forms. We would be honored if you would observe our traditions." The emphasis he placed on "observe" sent a warning tingle down Sarah's spine. She caught Dr. Rivera's subtle head shake from the corner of her eye, but protocol demanded her response. "We would be privileged to witness your sacred traditions." Kexar's scaled lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Excellent. Please, follow me to the ritual arena. The demonstrations are about to begin." The arena was a vast amphitheater carved from a single massive crystal, its faceted walls refracting the golden light into dazzling patterns. Thousands of Arxos filled the tiered seating, their scales creating a shimmering effect, like wind through metallic grass. Sarah's delegation was led to a privileged position near the arena floor. The forms you will witness date back to the founding of our empire, Kexar explained as warriors began to enter the arena. Each movement carries deep cultural significance. The challenge and response, the flow of combat, all serve to identify those most worthy to lead. Sarah watched, entranced, as pairs of warriors demonstrated their skills. It was like a deadly dance, each combination of strikes and blocks telling a story of dominance and submission. She found herself unconsciously analyzing the patterns, her combat training identifying the underlying principles of their fighting style. Fascinating, she murmured. The transitions between forms show clear evolutionary adaptations from their predatory ancestry. Kexar's head snapped toward her. You see the sacred patterns. Too late, Sarah realized she'd spoken aloud. I apologize if I've given offense. I merely meant to admire the precision of the demonstrations. No offense is given when truth is spoken. Kexar's voice carried across the arena, drawing all eyes to their position. But one who claims to see the patterns must be prepared to demonstrate understanding. Sarah's heart dropped as the High Commander extended his arm toward the arena floor. She heard Dr. Rivera's sharp intake of breath, felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon her. Commander Chen of Earth, Kexar's voice echoed through the crystal chamber. You are invited to demonstrate your understanding of the sacred forms. This is a great honor. Choose now. Accept and prove worthy, or decline and prove your words empty. Time seemed to stop as Sarah processed the implications. This was exactly the kind of cultural misunderstanding they'd been warned to avoid. But refusing now would destroy any chance of an alliance before negotiations even began. She removed her dress jacket, hearing the shocked whispers from her delegation. I would be honored to demonstrate my respect for your traditions, High Commander. A massive Arxos warrior awaited her on the arena floor, his scales gleaming like polished bronze. He moved through a series of warm-up exercises that displayed his incredible speed and strength. Sarah forced herself to breathe steadily as she assessed her opponent. The demonstration will proceed according to ancient law, Kexar announced. May the worthy prevail. The warrior attacked with frightening speed, but Sarah had spent the demonstration analyzing their combat style. She recognized the opening sequence and responded with the appropriate defensive form, or at least her human approximation of it. Her smaller size meant she couldn't match their movements exactly, but she could maintain the underlying principles. A murmur ran through the crowd as she successfully countered the first combination. Her opponent's eyes narrowed, and his next attack came faster, with more power. Sarah gave ground, adapting the forms she'd observed to her human limitations. Where they used strength, she substituted speed. When their reach exceeded hers, she changed angles to negate their advantage. The dance continued, growing more intense with each exchange. Sarah's muscles burned as she pushed herself to match her opponent's supernatural endurance. She knew she couldn't win in a contest of strength or stamina, but maybe she didn't have to. The patterns were there, hidden in the flowing combinations, not just combat forms, but a language of dominance and submission. As her opponent launched another attack, Sarah saw her opportunity. Instead of countering with the expected defense, she twisted into a modified version of a different form, one she'd seen demonstrated between warriors of different ranks. Her opponent hesitated for a crucial moment, ingrained cultural responses conflicting with the tactical situation. Sarah pressed her advantage, combining elements from 3 different forms into a sequence that was technically inferior but culturally significant. The warrior stepped back, eyes wide. Before he could recover, Sarah sealed her victory with a final combination that mimicked the submission ritual she'd observed earlier. She ended in a defensive stance, heart pounding as she waited to see if she'd completely misread their cultural cues. Silence fell over the arena. Sarah remained perfectly still as Kexar approached, his expression unreadable. After what felt like eternity, he spoke. The human chose true understanding of the sacred forms, his voice carried to every corner of the arena, not through mere imitation, but through adaptation and insight. The trial is concluded. Relief flooded through Sarah, until she saw Dr. Rivera's horrified expression. She turned back to Kexar and realized the High Commander was kneeling before her. "All hail the victor," he proclaimed, "who is proven worthy to lead the Arxos battle fleet during the Festival of Ascension. May her reign bring glory to the Empire." As thousands of Arxos warriors knelt in unison, Sarah realized that somewhere between the landing bay and this moment, she'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. Sarah stared at her reflection in the polished crystal wall of her new quarters, barely recognizing herself in the ceremonial Arxos armor. The iridescent scales had been fitted to her human frame with remarkable speed, creating a hybrid design that somehow emphasized both her alienness and her newfound authority. "You can't seriously be considering this." Dr. Rivera paced behind her, his diplomatic composure finally cracking after 12 hours of crisis meetings. "Commander, accepting military leadership of an alien battle fleet goes far beyond our mission parameters. The UN Security Council will." "Will what?" Sarah turned from the mirror. "Doctor, I've spent the last 12 hours learning exactly what refusing this position would mean. The Arxos take their combat trials seriously. Rejecting the victory would be seen as rejecting their entire cultural foundation. And she continued, according to their laws, such an insult would not only void any potential alliance, but would be considered an act of war. A war Earth cannot afford, especially not now." Rivera deflated slightly. "The Vorax." "Yes." Sarah activated the holographic display dominating one wall. A three-dimensional star map materialized, showing the known galaxy. Red markers indicated the steady advance of the Vorax Empire, a savage species that consumed everything in their path. The Arxos battle fleet is the only thing standing between the Vorax and Earth. We need this alliance. The Council anticipated cultural challenges, not this. Rivera gestured at her armor. "How can you lead an alien military force? The technological gap alone." A chime interrupted him. The door crystal shifted colors, indicating visitors. Sarah straightened, adopting the posture she'd observed in Arxos commanders. "Enter." High Commander Kexar ducked through the doorway, followed by a smaller Arxos female whose scales shimmered with an almost pearl-like quality. Both placed their right fists over their hearts. "The salute of equals." "War Queen," Kexar rumbled. "I trust your accommodations are satisfactory." "They are, High Commander." Sarah returned the salute, "though I admit to some uncertainty about the responsibilities I've inherited." "Understandable. This is Zixia, our chief military scientist. She will begin your neural interface training." Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry, my what?" The female Arxos stepped forward, her movements precise and efficient. "The battle fleet cannot be commanded without proper neural augmentation, War Queen. Your victory grants you access to our most advanced military technology." "Commander," Rivera's voice carried a warning note. Integration with alien technology wasn't part of. "How long will the training take?" Sarah interrupted. The diplomatic mission was already off script. Time to adapt and survive. "The procedure itself is brief," Zixia answered. "But mastering the interface typically requires several lunar cycles." However, she paused, studying Sarah with those unsettling violet eyes. "Your demonstrated ability to comprehend our combat forms suggests you may adapt more quickly." "We don't have several lunar cycles." Kexar's voice was grim. "The Vorax fleet advances. Our latest intelligence suggests they will reach the outer defense perimeter within 14 solar cycles." Sarah's mind raced. 2 weeks to learn alien military technology and prepare for an invasion. Then we better get started. "Dr. Rivera, please update Earth Command on the situation." "High Commander, I'll need complete tactical data on the Vorax threat." "As you command, War Queen." Kexar's scales rippled, their equivalent of a pleased expression. "Come." The neural integration chamber awaits. The chamber turned out to be a vast spherical room deep within the Crystal City. Banks of hyper-advanced computers lined the walls, their alien designs pulsing with internal light. In the center, a single command chair waited, surrounded by floating holographic interfaces. The neural augmentation will allow direct control of battle fleet systems, Zixia explained as she calibrated equipment. However, the process can be intense. Many candidates require multiple attempts before achieving stable integration. What happens if integration fails? Sarah asked, studying the chair's neural connectors. Best not to dwell on unsuccessful attempts, Kexar answered. Focus instead on your proven ability to adapt. Wonderful. Sarah took a deep breath and sat in the command chair. Cool metal sensors pressed against her temples and spine. Ready. Zixia's fingers danced across holographic controls. Beginning neural interface initialization. Try to remain calm and... Fire erupted in Sarah's brain. Her consciousness exploded outward, expanding through crystal circuits and quantum processors, ship schematics, tactical data, strategic simulations. Information flooded her mind in a tsunami of alien concepts. She screamed, or tried to. Her body seemed distant, irrelevant compared to the vast digital ocean she now inhabited. Warning messages flashed through her awareness in Arxos script that she somehow understood perfectly. Neural architecture incompatible. Forced synchronization required. Warning. Subject integrity at risk. Continue I/N. Sarah focused through the pain. Earth needed this alliance. Needed her to succeed. She reached for the alien systems with her mind, trying to impose order on the chaos of information. Fresh agony lanced through her consciousness as the interface tried to adapt human neural patterns to Arxos systems. Sarah felt herself beginning to fragment, memories scattering like leaves in a digital wind. She needed an anchor, something to hold herself together. Combat forms. The patterns she'd recognized in the arena. They weren't just physical movements. They were expressions of Arxos thought processes. She began organizing the flood of data into familiar forms, treating information flows like combat sequences. Alert. Unusual neural activity detected. New pattern emerging. Stabilization protocols engaging. Gradually, impossibly, order emerged from chaos. The pain receded to a manageable level as Sarah's mind adapted to its expanded awareness. She opened her eyes to find Kexar and Zixia staring at her in what appeared to be shock. Impossible, Zixia whispered. Full integration on the first attempt, and with an alien consciousness. How long? Sarah's voice was hoarse. 3 hours, Kexar answered. The fastest integration ever recorded. His scaled features shifted into an expression Sarah's enhanced perception recognized as fierce pride. You continue to exceed expectations, War Queen. Sarah stood carefully, adjusting to the strange sensation of being simultaneously in her body and connected to the vast Arxos network. Show me the battle fleet. The chamber's holographic displays came alive at her thought. Hundreds of capital ships appeared, their positions and status reports downloading directly into her consciousness. She could feel them, each vessel an extension of her expanded awareness. The fleet responds to your command, Kexar confirmed. What are your orders? Sarah studied the tactical displays, focusing on the Vorax advance. First, we need to restructure our defensive lines. The current formation assumes traditional Arxos combat doctrine, but the Vorax will expect that. Time to show them something new. New? Zixia's scales shifted in confusion. Human tactical innovations combined with Arxos technology. Sarah smiled as battle plans began forming in her augmented mind. Let's give them something they've never seen before. As she immersed herself in fleet operations, a priority alert flashed through the neural interface. Long-range sensors had detected unusual activity in the Vorax fleet. They were accelerating, pushing their invasion timeline forward. Sarah's smile faded. They didn't have 14 solar cycles after all. The enemy was coming, ready or not. And the fate of 2 civilizations now rested on her ability to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or numbers, but its infinite capacity to adapt and evolve. She just hoped she could demonstrate that strength before the Vorax arrived to put it to the ultimate test. The battle fleet's primary command center hummed with activity as Sarah reviewed combat simulations through her neural interface. Holographic ships danced through space, testing her hybrid human Arxos battle strategies against projected Vorax attack patterns. She was so absorbed in the tactical data that she almost missed the shift in atmosphere when War Prince Kravix entered. Almost, but not quite. The neural augmentation had heightened her awareness of Arxos' social cues. The way the other officers' scales rippled with tension told her everything she needed to know about this visit. War Queen. Kravix's voice dripped with barely concealed disdain. I request audience. Sarah turned, noting how the massive Arxos warrior deliberately stood at his full height. His ceremonial armor bore the marks of 100 victories, each one etched in precious metals. Granted, War Prince. How may I assist? You may remove yourself from command. Kravix's violet eyes narrowed. Your unconventional tactics dishonor our sacred combat traditions. The fleet grows restless under human leadership. Through her neural link, Sarah sensed the ripple of divided loyalties among the crew. Many supported her innovative approaches, but others shared Kravix's concerns. She needed to handle this carefully. The battle fleet's honor remains intact, War Prince, as does my right to command, earned through sacred combat. A fortunate accident, Kravix sneered. But tradition also allows for leadership challenges during times of war. I invoke the right of contest. The command center fell silent. Sarah accessed the relevant cultural protocols through her interface, though she already knew what they would show. A formal challenge couldn't be refused without surrendering her position. Very well. She kept her voice steady. Name the terms. 3 trials. Combat, strategy, and fleet command. The traditional tests of leadership. Kravix's scales rippled with satisfaction. Unless you fear facing a true Arxos warrior. Sarah smiled thinly. I accept. When? Now. Kravix gestured to the arena displays. The Vorax approach. We cannot waste time with delay. Through her neural link, Sarah broadcast the challenge announcement to the entire fleet. Within hours, thousands of Arxos warriors had assembled in the Crystal Arena, the same arena where she'd accidentally begun this journey. The first trial was pure combat. No neural interfaces, no technology, just warrior against warrior. Kravix towered over her in the arena, his massive frame rippling with lethal power. Still time to withdraw gracefully, he offered as they squared off. Return to your diplomatic mission. Leave war to warriors. Sarah settled into a fighting stance. I earned my place through combat. I'll defend it the same way. Kravix attacked with devastating force, but Sarah was ready. The neural interface had given her perfect recall of every combat form she'd observed. More importantly, it had helped her understand the underlying principles in ways even the Arxos had forgotten. Where Kravix fought with traditional power and precision, Sarah flowed like water. She combined forms in ways that shouldn't work, creating hybrid techniques that turned her smaller size into an advantage. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she systematically dismantled the War Prince's offense. Impossible, Kravix panted after she countered another combination. How are you? Understanding beats tradition, Sarah said, launching her own attack. Evolution outpaces stagnation. The match ended with Kravix on one knee, Sarah's hand at his throat. 1 trial down, 2 to go. The strategy trial took place in the neural simulation chamber. Both commanders were plugged into a complex battlefield scenario, drawn from Arxos military history. Sarah immediately recognized the famous Battle of 7 Suns, where an Arxos fleet had been trapped and nearly destroyed. But history had new lessons to teach. As the simulation unfolded, Sarah abandoned the traditional Arxos response. Instead, she applied principles from Earth's naval warfare, specifically the battle tactics of Admiral Yi Sun-Sin. The holographic ships moved in patterns that confused both the enemy and the watching Arxos commanders. When her forces achieved victory with minimal losses, Kravix's expression was thunderous. "You dishonor our greatest battle by changing its sacred forms. I honor it by learning from it," Sarah countered. "Victory matters more than method." The final trial would prove her point. Fleet command required coordinating actual battle fleet ships in real-time exercises. As Sarah took her place in the command chair, she felt the familiar rush of connecting to the vast network of Arxos vessels. But something was wrong. The neural interface felt sluggish, resisting her commands. Through the haze of digital interference, she detected unauthorized code modifications. Kravix hadn't just challenged her, he'd sabotaged her interface. Having difficulties, War Queen. His mock concern carried across the command channel. Perhaps human minds aren't suited for Arxos technology after all. Sarah gritted her teeth against the pain of forcing commands through corrupted circuits. She couldn't win using standard protocols. But then, that had never been her strength. Instead of fighting the interference, she embraced it. Let the system crash. Let her connection to the fleet fragment. In the chaos of disconnection, she found new patterns, new ways to make the technology work. Her consciousness expanded in unexpected ways, touching ships through backup systems and emergency protocols. The fleet responded sluggishly at first, then with increasing precision as she rebuilt the command network from scratch. The exercise became a dance of light and shadow. Sarah's forces moved in impossible patterns, utilizing tactics that had never been seen in Arxos space. She turned the interface's limitations into advantages, creating controlled communication disruptions that confused enemy targeting. When the final scores were calculated, her victory margin was unprecedented. The command center erupted in chaos as Arxos officers argued over the meaning of her methods. "Enough." Kravix's voice boomed over the commotion. "These trials are invalid. She uses human tricks to corrupt our sacred combat forms." "No," High Commander Kexar stepped forward. "She uses innovation to improve them. That is why the combat forms exist, not to preserve the past, but to build the future." He turned to Sarah. "An important lesson, as we face an enemy that cares nothing for tradition." Sarah stood, her neural connection stabilizing as emergency repairs began. The Vorax won't expect Arxos ships to fight like humans, just as they won't expect humans to command Arxos technology. That's our advantage. If any advantage remains, Zixia interrupted, rushing into the command center. Long-range sensors confirm the Vorax fleet has doubled its speed. They'll reach our borders in less than 5 solar cycles. Sarah absorbed the tactical updates through her restored interface. The enemy was coming faster than anyone had predicted, and now she had to unite a divided fleet before it was too late. "War Prince," she turned to Kravix, "your skills are needed. The fleet requires your experience, not as a rival, but as an advisor. Will you serve?" For a long moment, the massive warrior studied her. Finally, he placed his fist over his heart. "I will serve, War Queen, but I still question your methods." "Good." Sarah smiled. "Question everything. Innovation comes from challenge." She turned to address the assembled officers. "Now let's show the Vorax what happens when human creativity meets Arxos power." As the command center burst into activity, Sarah allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. She'd won the trials, but the real test was still coming. The Vorax would reach Arxos space in less than 5 days. It was time to prove that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't technology or tradition, but the ability to evolve beyond both. Sarah's neural connection to the battle fleet sparked with warning signals as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Something wasn't adding up about the Vorax advance. Their attack patterns were too precise, their movements too perfectly timed to counter standard Arxos defenses. "Display Tactical Overlay Alpha 7, she commanded. The holographic war room shifted, showing the positions of both fleets. "Zixia, what do you make of this?" The science officer studied the display, her pearlescent scales shifting thoughtfully. "The Vorax are aggressive, but not usually this coordinated. Their tactics show unprecedented sophistication. Exactly. Sarah highlighted several fleet movements. Look at their approach vectors. They're not just avoiding our standard patrol routes. They're exploiting gaps in our defense grid that shouldn't be visible to outside observers. War Prince Kravik stepped closer, his earlier hostility tempered by growing respect. You suspect information theft. Worse, Sarah's fingers danced through the holographic data. These movement patterns are optimized specifically against Arxos' tactical doctrine. Someone isn't just feeding them information. They're providing detailed strategic analysis. The implications hung heavy in the war room. A traitor within the Arxos High Command wouldn't just explain the Vorax's sudden tactical brilliance. It would explain their accelerated timeline. Through her neural interface, Sarah sensed a subtle disturbance in the fleet's communication network. An encrypted transmission, hidden beneath normal military traffic. If she hadn't been monitoring the system in her uniquely human way, she would have missed it entirely. Zixia, trace that signal. Full spectrum analysis. Sarah kept her voice casual, aware they might be watched. Her neural implants tracked the transmission's path through the Arxos network, bouncing between relay stations in a complex pattern designed to hide its destination. But Sarah had spent her entire career thinking outside traditional military paradigms. Instead of following the signal directly, she analyzed its pattern variations against ship movements over the past month. A correlation emerged, one that chilled her to her core. War Prince, she said quietly. Please secure the war room. Authorization level midnight black. Kravik's eyes narrowed, but he complied. Armor plates slid into place over the crystal walls, cutting off all external communications. Speak freely, War Queen. The Vorax aren't just being fed information. Sarah brought up a new tactical display. They're being guided. Look at their fleet formations. They are using modified versions of experimental Arxos battle strategies. Strategies that only exist in the sealed archives of the Military Council. Impossible, Zixia whispered. Those archives can only be accessed by council members. Sarah completed the thought. And based on the transmission patterns I've detected, at least 3 members of the Military Council are involved. The revelation hit like a physical blow. The Military Council wasn't just the highest authority in the Arxos fleet. They were the guardians of their entire martial culture. Names, Kravik demanded, his scales darkening with rage. Give me names, and I will end this dishonor myself. Not yet. Sarah held up a hand. We need proof that will convince the entire fleet, and we need to understand their plan. She accessed deeper levels of the neural network, pulling up personnel files. Why would council members betray their own people to the Vorax? Zixia's eyes widened. The purification doctrine. It was proposed last cycle but rejected as too extreme. Some council members believed that Arxos society had grown weak, that we needed a crucible to burn away impurity and restore our warrior heritage. And what better crucible than war? Sarah's mind raced through the implications. They're not just helping the Vorax. They are trying to engineer a controlled conflict, one that will force the Arxos to either evolve or die. But the Vorax cannot be controlled, Kravik growled. They are a plague upon the galaxy. Once unleashed, the council traders probably believe they can contain the damage, Sarah interrupted. But you're right. If the Vorax break through our defenses, they won't stop until they've consumed everything in their path, including Earth. She stood, her decision made. We have 3 days before the Vorax reach our borders. That's 3 days to expose the traitors, unite the fleet, and completely redesign our battle strategy. Through her neural link, she began drafting new combat protocols. War Prince, I need you to quietly gather warriors you trust absolutely. Zixia, find a way to lock the traitors out of our systems without alerting them. And you, War Queen? Kravik asked. Sarah smiled grimly. I'm going to give the Council exactly what they want, a chance to purify Arxos society through combat. They just might not appreciate my interpretation of the doctrine. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah used her neural interface to orchestrate a complex dance of ships and personnel, positioning loyal forces while maintaining the appearance of normal preparations. Meanwhile, she worked with Zixia to plant subtle bugs in the fleet's command protocols, bugs that would activate only under very specific conditions. The military council demanded constant updates, which Sarah provided with just enough detail to maintain their confidence. Through it all, she could sense their encrypted transmissions to the Vorax fleet, providing data that was perfectly accurate and completely misleading. "The trap is set," she announced to her inner circle as the deadline approached. "But timing will be critical. If we move too soon, the traitors will simply trigger their contingency plans. Too late, and the Vorax will be inside our defense perimeter." "The loyalty of my warriors is absolute," Kravix reported. "They stand ready." "My teams have isolated the critical command systems," Zixia added. "On your signal, we can sever the Council's access completely." Sarah nodded, reviewing the tactical situation through her neural link one final time. The Vorax fleet was now less than 24 hours from Arxos space. Soon, the Council would have to commit to their final phase. "War Prince, get your forces into position." "Zixia, prepare to execute Program Shattered Mirror." Sarah stood, her armor shifting to accommodate the movement. It's time to show everyone what happens when humanity's talent for unconventional warfare meets Arxos' military might. As she strode toward the council chambers, Sarah allowed herself a tight smile. The traitors thought they were engineering a crucible to purify their society. They had no idea that a human was about to turn their own doctrine against them, or that their perfect plan was about to collide with humanity's greatest gift, the ability to change the rules of the game entirely. The real war was about to begin. And this time, the enemy wouldn't see it coming until it was far too late. The military council chamber gleamed like polished obsidian, its crystalline walls reflecting the tactical displays that showed both the approaching Vorax fleet and the Arxos battle formations. Sarah stood before the assembled council members, her neural interface silently executing commands that would determine the fate of two civilizations. "The enemy approaches our borders," Council Leader Vexthor announced, his ancient scales dull with age. "War Queen, present your battle strategy." Sarah could feel the hidden communications flying between the corrupt council members, coordinating their final moves. Her own countermeasures slid beneath their encrypted signals like digital shadows. "Of course, Honored Council." Sarah activated the main tactical display. "As you can see, I've arranged our forces in traditional defensive formations. The First Fleet guards our core systems, while the Second and Third Fleets maintain our border security." Through her neural link, she sensed the traitors' satisfaction. Everything appeared to be proceeding according to their plans. The Arxos formations would be perfectly positioned for the Vorax to exploit their manufactured weaknesses. "A conservative approach," Vexthor noted. "Perhaps too conservative, given the threat we face, which is why I've prepared a secondary strategy." Sarah brought up new tactical overlays, one that draws on both Arxos' strength and human innovation. The chamber erupted in argument as council members saw their carefully laid plans begin to unravel. But before they could act, Sarah sent the signal that activated Program Shattered Mirror. Throughout the fleet, corrupted command protocols suddenly reversed themselves. Ships that appeared to be in defensive formations revealed themselves to be in attack positions. Weapon systems that registered as offline came alive with deadly purpose. "What is the meaning of this?" Vexthor demanded, but Sarah was already moving. "Now, War Prince." Kravix and his loyal warriors burst into the chamber, weapons ready. Council members Vexthor, Mirax, and Koldar, the War Prince's voice boomed. "You stand accused of high treason against the Arxos Empire." "Lies." Vexthor rose, his scales darkening with rage. "This human witch attempts to destroy our sacred traditions." "No," Sarah countered, projecting the evidence through every display in the chamber. "I'm protecting them from those who would use them as an excuse for genocide." The proof was undeniable. Encrypted communications with the Vorax. Battle plans deliberately designed to fail. the complete purification doctrine, with its plans to sacrifice billions of lives in a misguided attempt to strengthen their species. But the traitors had one final card to play. Vexthor slammed his hand down on a hidden control panel. If we cannot purify our society through controlled conflict, then let it burn entirely. The Vorax fleet approaches at maximum speed, their weapons primed for total annihilation. Sarah smiled. I was counting on that. Through her neural interface, she activated the true battle plan. The apparently scattered Arxos ships suddenly moved with perfect coordination, forming entirely new patterns that had never been seen in space combat. Behold, she announced, the true strength of our peoples combined. The Vorax fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel directly into Sarah's trap. Where they expected to find weakened defensive lines, they instead encountered hybrid formations that combined Arxos power with human tactical innovation. All ships, execute battle plan Prometheus, Sarah commanded through the neural network. The fleet responded instantly, moving with impossible precision. Arxos capital ships performed maneuvers that should have torn them apart, their crews trusting in human calculations that defied traditional doctrine. Smaller vessels darted between the massive Vorax ships, striking at weak points identified through Sarah's unique analysis of their attack patterns. Impossible, Vexthor whispered as he watched his perfect plan collapse. The fleet cannot move this way. Our traditions exist to be built upon, Sarah said, directing the battle through her neural link. To evolve and grow stronger, just as humanity evolved from using sticks and stones to reaching the stars. The battle raged across space, a dance of energy weapons and tactical brilliance. The Vorax, expecting to find easy prey, instead found themselves facing an opponent that combined the best of two species. Their own stolen intelligence worked against them, leading them into carefully prepared killing zones. War Prince, Sarah commanded, execute Phase 2. Kravix nodded grimly. Throughout the fleet, ships began implementing the hybrid combat forms Sarah had developed, physical manifestations of the same principles she demonstrated in the arena during her first accidental victory. The Vorax fleet, unable to adapt to the unprecedented tactics, began to break apart. Their formations shattered under the combined assault of human ingenuity and Arxos power. You see, Sarah addressed the stunned council members as the battle turned decisively in their favor. True strength comes not from clinging to the past, but from being willing to embrace change while honoring tradition. The corrupt council members were led away in chains, their plans for racial purification replaced by a demonstration of genuine evolution. The Vorax fleet, broken and scattered, fled back into deep space. Through her neural interface, Sarah felt the joy and pride of the combined fleet. Arxos warriors celebrated not just their victory, but the discovery of new ways to interpret their ancient combat forms. War Queen, Kravix approached and knelt before her. The fleet awaits your next command. Sarah looked out at the battlefield, where human tactical doctrine and Arxos military might had combined to create something entirely new. Send word to Earth. Tell them the Alliance is secure, and that humanity has earned its place among the stars not through strength of arms, but through strength of adaptation. As the message was relayed, Sarah allowed herself to truly feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger. Two species had looked beyond their differences and found something greater than either could have achieved alone. The price of victory had been the willingness to change, to evolve beyond comfortable limitations, but the reward was worth every sacrifice, a future where humanity and the Arxos would face the challenges of the galaxy together, each making the other stronger. In the end, Sarah reflected, that was humanity's greatest gift to the universe. Not our technology or our fighting spirit, but our endless capacity to adapt, to change, and to help others do the same. As she looked out at the combined fleet, now stronger than ever, she knew that gift would help light the way forward into an uncertain but promising future.